Hey guys, what's up? I already covered something like 4 to 5 R-2R DACs on this channel, but today's unit I feel that outperforms them all. And if you're asking yourself a very basic question, so why R-2R, what is so special about them, so why such complicated digital creatures? While chip-based Delta Sigma DACs and FPGA DACs already outperformed several R-2R units in terms of dynamic range, they could never really get right that long-lasting aroma, those natural textures, those smooth decays, and very simple things like reproducing the human pitch. With R-2R, there is something that is unmeasurable even by world's best audio analyzers. So today I'll be testing an outstanding R-2R ladder DAC that is called Musician Aquarius. It's their best shot at high-end, and I cannot wait to tell you more, so let's check it out. Design-wise, Aquarius borrows the same cues of its smaller brother Pegasus. It is just heavier, bolder looking, wider and deeper. It follows a similar design language, and that's a good thing, since I always liked the sleek and minimalist look of its predecessor. It uses CNC machined oversized metal plates on all sides, and that will easily protect it from all wireless interference. They put some of the best metal fit I've seen on DA converters, with silicone absorption pads. I'm spotting only low-intensity LEDs that will not bother in a dark environment. It's on the bigger and heavier side, that is for sure, but it can still form an elegant-looking stereo or headphone setup. As for controls, from left to right there is your input selectors, phase invert, on-off, non-oversampling or oversampling button, mute and mod button that lets you choose 2 digital filters. On its back, all the nicer digital inputs are present as USB, AAC, coaxial, optical and 2 I2S inputs. Aquarius is a fully balanced DAC, and as such it offers a pair of XLR and RCA analog outputs, which have fixed volume levels of 3.6 volts via XLR and 1.8 volt via RCA. As for the tech inside it, in an R-2R ladder DAC, the signal is being converted from digital to analog by the help of hundreds of resistors that converge into 2 or 4 ladders. The higher the precision of those resistors means a higher resolution can be obtained from the ladder. They are hand-picking the best ones that are reaching a precision of 0.005%, and those will make way into their Aquarius. This is their first unit that has 4 ladders of resistors instead of 2 on Pegasus and Draco. On the analog side, Aquarius is using some of the best low-loss tantalum polymer capacitors, and I'm seeing higher grade electrolytic caps as ELNA Silmic 2. There are plenty of voltage regulators from analog devices, and mind you, those aren't op-amps. That O-type transformer is filtered 2 times. Just before it, 2 encapsulated regulators will be conditioning that power, and after it, an additional regulation stage will make sure its digital and analog circuitry is getting the cleanest possible power. It's important to know that Aquarius is not using a single op-amp in its output stage. You can spot 8 discrete devices that are doing that. Its capacitance seems much bigger than that of Pegasus, those numbers doubled, and that is a very comfortable sight. Okay folks, enough with the talk and let's hit some eardrums. When it comes to sound performance, I'll start by saying that Aquarius is by far the biggest shapeshifter that I've experienced with DACs before and after Barney. So they are recommending something like 300 hours, something like that, and that was certainly the case with my unit, because after 2 weeks of non-stop music playback, it was a very different beast altogether. It was a different animal altogether. At first I was very disappointed, so it didn't have any dynamics at all. It was very flat, emotionless, so it sounded really bidimensional. It didn't have that big enveloping sound that I was expecting from an R-2R, from a proper R-2R unit. It was very shy, it didn't have any authority in the bass. But 1 week later, it was starting building up a little bit of mid-range presence, some authority in the bass returned. It wasn't that shy anymore, so some mid started building up on those skinny bones. And from a shy unit, it was just, I felt just the power rising from within. Another week passed, and boy, what a big change. Wow, right now it's just big sounding, bold sounding, very dynamic, very explosive, very engaging sounding, call it as you want. It's no longer shy sounding, it's no longer small sounding. A very, very big change that I didn't expect. So right now it just adds a little bit more air in my music, so the void spaces are bigger, there are more layers in my music, there's finally some kind of order in my music, something that wasn't here 2 weeks ago. So it sounded bigger even compared to my reference DACs that were sitting just 1 meter away from it. It was massive sounding, and that was felt not only with loudspeakers but also with reference headphones. Besides a good flow, so it added impact and just chest pounding impact, let's say so. And if you checked some of my older DAC reviews, you've observed that I've complained that R-2R units cannot keep up in terms of transient response, so they are not that fast sounding, not lightning quick sounding. They cannot deliver proper bass slam. There was just one unit that was very impressive in that department, and that was Audio GD R7. And I believe that musician Aquarius basically follows its footsteps as it properly slams and pounds my body with an incredible force. So it delivered lightning quick bass notes, and it impressed an electronic addict as myself. So this is proper bass that has quality and quantity, something that not a lot of R-2R units can be proud about. In a loudspeaker setup, you should know that Aquarius doesn't have preamp functionality, so there is no way to control its volume. For that, you'll need an integrated amplifier, or you can go the high-end route with a preamplifier followed by a power amplifier. So in my case, I've used a Benchmark HP for preamp, followed by an AHB2 power amplifier. And I also have a KHS S300 power amplifier, somewhere around there. So in this particular setup, Aquarius sounded like I had no walls in my room. So it just pushed and pulled more air where there was just no air at all. So it sounded just bigger, wider, deeper, call it as you want, just massive sounding compared to all my converters. And mind you, I'm not using entry-level converters. So I felt that even with my headphone setup, and of course the difference wasn't that big due to the nature of headphone listening, with drivers just sitting millimeters away from my eardrums. But in my living room, that was a very different story altogether. It sounded more effortless, it sounded more real to everything that I have around. It never pressed the brakes. On the contrary, it was adding just a little bit of dynamics, making sure that every note is reaching its peak. So, in my opinion, it was just highly engaging, highly toe tapping, so very pleasing to listen to, sometimes even explosive with some particular music. There was a very tight control with my loudspeakers. I didn't experience any flabbiness with electronica music, and that's a very big deal. It performed flawless in my loudspeaker setup. It was both technical, clean, but also musical sounding. You know what's unusual with Aquarius? It sounds very clean, very detailed, very transparent. It shows all those tiny details, and it's such a natural at doing this. It's like it's doing nothing. So I'm pretty sure that those hand-selected resistors and those femtosecond clocks really leveled up its Sherlock Holmes skills to 120. I was simply blown away. I had my doubts at first that it would sound great to maybe good to great in terms of dynamic range, but I was all wrong. So it's pretty much on the same level with something like Matrix Audio Element X and Gustard X26 Pro, and mind you, those already are very clean, very detailed, very highly transparent units, so that's quite impressive. I didn't expect that. Aquarius sounded exactly as clean, exactly as textured, exactly as transparent, so it was just highlighting the notes on the inside, but also their contours and leading edges on the outside. So in this regard, it sounds very different compared to usual R-2R DAC. So this is not only a smooth and, let's say, relaxed and natural organic sounding unit, but also a very technical sounding unit that I cannot say about all R-2R units. It's extremely satisfying hearing so much more of everything in my tracks that I know for a lifetime. So there isn't just a wall of sound, there is flow, there is plenty of space between each and every musician, and that's quite impressive. Moving on to the Transient Response, some R-2R units that passed through these hands were mighty impressive in the bass slam department and the bass kick department, but not so much when it comes to speed. So I like mellow, I liked relaxed music, and I listen to that sometimes. But when I want to rock out, when I want to increase my dopamine levels, I would do that with some fast, impactful tunes. And that is precisely why some oversampling Delta Sigma DAC would always be at my side, no matter what. So usually R-2R DACs aren't that impressive in this department, in the Transient Response. Those are slightly pressing the brakes, so never going in and out in a split second. Decently accelerating, but never really having a need for speed, so to speak. Of course, there are several exceptions from that rule, and I believe that Rockna Wavelight is the best example I can give. That one is incredibly fast, very snappy, very hard punching, always keeping up with the most demanding tunes. That one is simply a Transient Response monster and doesn't need no additional help. But if I'm adding a fast and snappy preamplifier to the Aquarius, like Benchmark HPA4, then I can make it exactly as fast and hard punching in the bass. They went with a deeper bass response that feels faster and clearer sounding compared to their Pegasus, which was great in here, but not really amazing. As for Soundstage, it isn't a novelty to anyone that big R-2R units are sounding pretty much like that, so big, expansive, airy, deep sounding. But the ones that have a very powerful output stage and a very healthy capacitance would be just stretching wide open, pretty much to unlimited stage size. You should know that musician put a much bigger accent on its power supply, on its filtering stages. It has a lot more capacitors compared to Pegasus, twice the number, and of course it shows while listening to it. So it sounded bigger to my own converters. All my music was almost unrecognizable. All that came towards me from weird angles, and that was quite interesting to experience. It sounded even bigger to something like a Gold Note DS10 Plus and Matrix Audio Element X, and mind you, those already are quite impressive in this department. Of course, all that change was felt a lot more in a loudspeaker setup and less in a headphone setup. Aquarius sounded like someone swapped my KEF reference-free loudspeakers with bigger reference-5 loudspeakers. There was just more of everything in my room, so more air. I was picking up those notes out of thin air like cherries from a branch, and that was so easy to do. Of course, in a headphone setup, the difference wasn't that big, but still, I've heard just a better holography. Music wasn't pushed inside my head anymore. I felt that it pushed all that energy around me. Mentioning its noise floor, it's like talking about an invisible man. Because no matter if I use it in my loudspeaker setup or headphone setup, it didn't increase the noise floor at all. It didn't add any nasty gremlins playing in the background. And as far as noise floor goes, it cannot get much better than this. And mind you, those KEF UniQ drivers and of course those portable IEMs are extremely sensitive to upstream equipment. Those can easily pick up residual noise from lower quality sources, from bad amplifiers. Luckily that didn't happen, and considering its power supply implementation, I would be surprised hearing anything less than an immaculate performance in terms of noise floor. As for frequency response, its low end is calm, like a bomb, ready to go off. So it's bold, it's juicy in here, it goes to the lowest speeds. At first it might appear as slightly elevated in the bass, but no, this is exactly how bass should be played back, should be maintained and decayed at the right time. So it's highly detailed in the bass, it's fast, it's impactful sounding. and it decays just at the right time. And no matter if it's sub bass or mid bass, it just sounds really effortless, very layered, without a single trace of distortion. I feel that it's a big departure from its smaller brother Pegasus, because it offers not only the quality but also the quantity in the bass. Aquarius is really a transient response monster, mostly thanks to its immaculate bass performance down to the smallest details. And no matter if you're listening to some jazz or acoustic music or some electronica music, you'll be surprised by how much more bass Aquarius will be able to pull up from your tunes. There is always a bass note lingering somewhere, and it can't hide from its gaze. Mid-range is probably the biggest reason you are watching this review. So sure enough, there are several oversampling DACs that are doing a fine job in here in the mid-range, but R-2R units are just doing a better job. So those are sounding more natural, more organic in here, and they are doing that by default with no additional help. In my opinion, Aquarius is actually a linear sounding DAC, top to bottom, so it doesn't emphasize anything. It wants to be just as detailed as possible, while fully retaining the organic nature of your music. I wouldn't describe it as warm sounding or as meaty sounding. Aquarius is more about being honest sounding, so fully preserving the innards and the texture of the music that is happening in this region. Mid-range comes just in right doses, and it feels lifelike and natural all the time. There is energy in the treble, there is plenty of micro details, even past top octave, and all that comes without sacrificing inner details or anything really. So you can listen to your rock and metal tunes without any listening fatigue, without ringing. I believe that it has that special recipe that oversampling Delta Sigma DACs are not getting right as of yet. So I didn't experience any brightness with it. I just wanted to listen to as much music and rediscover that organic sound that my own converters can't render that well. As for my conclusions, I'm searching for transparency, for linearity, for detailed retrieval my whole life, and I want the most extended frequency response, all while being organic and natural sounding. And that feels really like being Don Quixote fighting windmills, because no matter what, there's always some kind of compromise down the road. The only compromise I see with Aquarius is that it's just a DAC, nothing more, nothing less. Lucky me, I already have a preamplifier at my side, so I can easily integrate it into a speaker setup, into a stereo setup. Unlike you, a preamplifier is pretty much mandatory, unless you already have one or if you're using an integrated amplifier. As far as technicalities go, it had everything dialed up to 11 and a little bit more. It will impress the most with its highly layered and extended presentation, then some organic matter will crawl into your tunes, and much later on some dynamics and bass impact would make a glorious appearance in your music. When that happens, there is nothing more to complain about. It sounds like real music, not like a soulless amalgam of sounds and noises, and this is the biggest compliment I can give to musician Aquarius. Okay guys, my full in-depth review can be found on my website. In case you want to support this channel, please subscribe to it, and as usual, listen to my music. Be positive, and I'll see you soon. Cheers!